This is modules everywhere. This isn't a Browserify talk. Browserify is mainly pretty much the top like 10% of what you need to do to use NPM in the browser. This is really about the other 90%. It's based on using Browserify and NPM in the browser in production for the last, well, about around 10 months. I'm Mike MacCana. For the first 10 years of my career, I was a Linux guy. If you install Red Hat Linux, I'm the Mike M in your sudoers file. Hello. After that 10 years, I swapped and became a web developer. I kind of used Python to get into web dev, and then that led on to JavaScript, and JavaScript was a gateway drug. So I built web stuff for Google, Microsoft, and a whole bunch of other startups. I was building stuff for one of those startups at the end of last year when I applied for a thing called an EV-SSL certificate. You'll have seen these on GitHub, Stripe, Medium, and NPM. Where somebody actually checks the company behind the public key in the certificate. It allegedly took 7 to 10 days. In my case, it took 3 weeks. The guys I was hanging out with last night from NPM Inc., theirs took a month and was a massive pain in the ass. The guys I was hanging out with the people I was hanging out with the night before from Monsanto, theirs also took a month and was a huge pain in the ass. So being filled with rage at GoDaddy, which actually is a really common way to start a company these days, I made this my career, and I set up a company called CertSimple, which do EV-SSL in an average of 5 hours, sometimes in about 20 minutes, which is 40 to 100 times faster than Symantec, Komodo, and GoDaddy. Let's Encrypt don't do this at all. They don't have a validation team. So CertSimple connects to governments in 62 countries, independent business directories. We do a whole bunch of data ratification and kind of fuzzy matching between different data sources. We do web crypto stuff, which is awesome. We don't need anyone to do any run anything on their servers as part of getting their company verified. We also generate OpenSSL and PowerShell, so people don't actually have to answer any questions in a terminal. We do real-time updates during the validation process. It's fun stuff. This is actually, and finally, we actually hook up with the certificate authority to sign the certificates. This is about how CertSimple is built. We use NPM on the back end, obviously, because our back end is Node. We also follow the Isaac-style philosophy of using NPM for everything. I'll jump ahead to the next slide, actually. There we go. So we use NPM on the back end. We use NPM for everything. I'll talk more about that in a moment. We use NPM on the front end. All of our code lives in NPM modules. All of our web components live in NPM modules. All of our SaaS lives in NPM modules. And this talk is about why we chose NPM, how you can use NPM, and all the things you wish you'll have known earlier, which thankfully you will know beforehand, or maybe now if you've already started on your journey. So why NPM? NPM is where the packages are. The only other front-end package manager of any significance is Bower, and Bower is a lot smaller and growing a lot more slowly. There's also JSPM, which is too small to actually fit on that list. Regardless of the technical merits of different browser browser repositories, the network effects of NPM, it means you probably really shouldn't use any other repository. It really is where the packages are. To illustrate that, when we were building CertSimple, we just picked good front-end things. We didn't pick good front-end things that were on NPM, but everything we did chose had an active maintained package from the authors on NPM. So jQuery is maintained on NPM by the jQuery Foundation in 2015. So is Stripe. We use a thing called Reactive.js, which you've never heard of, but The Guardian, the newspaper, use this as their binding framework. It's their internal functional reactive virtual DOM thing. They chose a name that's really similar to React because it's both based around the same programming things and based around the same functional programming concepts. Yeah, we love it, but this talk doesn't require you to use Reactive. Select dies, other things that we found useful. Every single thing we looked for was available on NPM. And to show how front-end attitude to NPM has changed over time, this is select dies. It's the most popular way to style a drop-down list box. In 2013, people were bugging the maintainer to publish it on NPM, and he said, no, why would I? This is a front-end package. It doesn't belong on NPM. And then people bullied him for 2 years, and then in March, he caved in. And this is where NPM's at these days. Like in front-end world, people like Leveroo release Blissful.js, and then on the same day it's released, it's on NPM. If you want to install it, get it from NPM rather than download this script tag. So why use NPM on the front end? Mainly to get people to use maintained open source projects. There's a lot of front-end developers who fix things by going to Stack Overflow. I fix things by going to Stack Overflow. But the answers I look for these days are go find this module and install it, rather than here is some code. Stuff that's copy-pasted over time, I've got to move way more quicker. Stuff that's copy-pasted from Stack Overflow isn't maintainable. You might not even understand it. It's not a great way to build your product. There's also things we didn't know we needed. So front-end people tend to talk about DOM manipulation as like where they get their libraries from. General JavaScript things like the European list of VAT rates for different countries, the sorts module, which is functions for array sort, country data, which is basically the CIA World Factbook in JSON, are all on NPM, and we use all of these in our front end. Other module formats, window globals are dead. Require.js never had a repository, so it's dead. UMD only exists because window globals and Require.js, so UMD is dead. If you see UMD code, just delete it. It's not doing anything. There's very few AS6 packages, and but when there's more of them, they'll be on NPM. Modules everywhere. Our backend uses NPM. We write all our original code as NPM modules. There's no libdir, there's no anything else. I got this idea from Isaac. I think it's great. Our require statements are to require our own software, require CertSimple dash whatever. It's really, there's no .. there's no directory, there's no thinking. We just make private NPM modules for everything, and it works. Our imports are beautiful, easier to open source. If we make things that we think would be useful to the open source community, we can just publish it. And it makes us write things like we'd publish it. We have tests and readmes and lists of dependencies and other good things. And versioning. Building NPM modules, you basically have, to build an NPM module, you need to bundle it. To bundle it, you pick something that fits in with what you're using to build. Most people will, there's advantages to Webpack, but there's also, again, kind of network effects around Gulp. So we use Gulp and Browserify. Browserify is pretty basic. Here is our front end. Here is index.js. It is, the whole of the line is require CertSimple front end. That is our whole index.js. We run that through Browserify. It takes that thing, that module that's being pulled in, and all that module's dependencies, which are our entire front end, and outputs this bundle, which is what we give to the browser. Here is our front-end package.json. You can read that on the slides. It just has a couple of extra things that turn on some useful bits and pieces I'll talk about in a second. And here is our CertSimple dash front-end module. var $= require jQuery, reactive = require reactive. It's all pretty boring stuff. So here's the rest of the things you need to know beyond Gulp and Browserify. What about HTML? Depending on whatever framework you're using, you might want to load something that's some kind of template that is not JavaScript. There's a thing called BRFS that you can use for that. It's Browserify file system. It looks like Node.fs read file. It's not Node.fs read file. All it does is include that file inline in your bundle. And yeah, by using this, you can load up your mustache templates, your whatever else you want to use on the front end. Reactive uses mustache templates and then turns it into a virtual DOM, which is nice because mustache is kind of familiar to a lot of people. But yeah, you can apply this to any other non-JavaScript file you want to load. Next question is, what about Sass? Newer versions of Sass actually have an importer option, which is really useful. One of the importers that you can get from NPM, oddly enough, is Sass NPM. So using that, this is what our style.scss looks like. We have one file, which is universal, which is basically branding. Very minimal set of global styles. It's kind of our reset and our colors. Everything else is actually imported from NPM. So in the Node module CertSimple front end and Node modules CertSimple component email notification, all those files have a style.scss. And by requiring something which matches the name of an NPM module, this is going to find that Node module using require resolve and just load that file. It's weirdly enough, a week ago I was having a dinner party and I was talking to my friend and he'd apparently written npm-sass. So we're going to fight with a trident to determine who wins. And yeah. Components. NPM loves components. We have a module per component. So here's a little X-ray of our site. All right, so we load the bundle, which is JS index.js. That requires CertSimple frontend, and CertSimple requires things like require progress bar, require Twitter customers. In our interactive, we have elements that match progress bar and Twitter customers, and they are loaded up as components. Where as soon as we, so the progress bar is like the ordering progress bar, customers is happy customers. If we want to reuse this, for example, say the footer of our blog, we're going to replace the footer with that with like tweets from happy customers. We can just load up that component as a module and use it. And we use the same thing for our styling as well. All our styling is relative to our component. Our universal styling is very minimal and, again, just colors. Things that are relative to the progress bar are styled under .progressBar. People are afraid of nesting. I'm not sure why they're afraid of nesting. Nesting works. It's a hierarchical data structure, and it makes sense that it's been nested under the name of its component. So yeah, SAS and SAS NPM and modules work out really, really well. The other thing that hits people when, 8 minutes, cool. The other thing that hits people when they start getting to Browserify is keeping their bundles small. Essentially, it means making sure you don't deliver 3 megabytes of JavaScript to your front end. There is an amazing tool called Diskify, which actually looks way more fun if I show it to you. So here is our production bundle with a tool called Diskify. Diskify is kind of similar to like Daisy Disk or any of those like hard drive cleanup tools, except it's for bundles. It allows you to tell that, for example, we have 646K of JavaScript, which is more than I'd like, but we do things like build PKCS 10 requests inside the browser. So we have ASN1 support and a lot of like complex stuff in our front end. And yeah, this allows us to tell where the space is going. So that's 646K. Node modules is most of that. Here's PKI.js, which we use for web crypto stuff. Here's jQuery. Here is our CertSimple frontend module. Here is our main module. Here is Reactive. Here are all the libraries we're using for our front end. So obviously, there's a lot of amazing things available on NPM, but some of them are a lot bigger. For example, PKI.js, I want to get into that code, and it's, I think, PKI.js and ASN1.js are maybe 300K, and I want to get in there, and I'm going to chop them down. Those modules themselves are not very modular. But this allows us, Diskify allows us to see exactly where our space is going, and know that in this case, ASN1.js, which is 84K, and PKI.js, which is 129K, are the source of where our space is going. The other thing is keeping your code relevant. If you're putting everything in Node modules, and you've got maybe a few hundred Node modules in there from you and other people, you probably don't really want to look at them when you're using Sublime. I really don't. So that's quite simple. There's a script which I'm about to upload, which allows you to build a Sublime project file that only shows private NPM modules. So yeah, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here so you can see it better. So when I open up my project in Sublime, this is actually what it looks like. All the relevant stuff is at the top. It's incredibly easy to find things. There's maybe 40 modules, private modules, which are the whole of the back end and the whole of the front end of CertSimple. It's a really nice thing. And underneath each module, of course, we have our JavaScript, our HTML, and our styling. It's great. There are kind of unknown unknowns we've had, like, oh wow, we made a great ordering UI, and obviously we want to reuse parts of that for people who want to change aspects of their certificates. We do some HTML5 clipboard stuff, etc. We didn't think about that when we made the HTML5 clipboard. We just made a component. But to be able to reuse that component is a simple require CertSimple component CSR upload, copy area. And now we can reuse that component from our ordering system in our certificate management system. It's a really nice setup. Deploying. You probably know this already because a lot of you are Node people. If you don't, package.json isn't enough. You can be very exact with your package.json requirements, and that doesn't necessarily mean that what ends up on your Linux server matches what's on your Mac. So say you're really exact with your dependencies. Package A, version 1, needs package B, version 1.20. All right, well, B version 1.0 needs version C 1 or newer. And then C, the installed version of C could be any version newer than 1.00. So it's really, you might be exact about your dependencies, but are your dependencies also exact about their dependencies? People used to check in their Node modules. I don't like doing that anymore. We've been using shrink wrap. We love it in production. Use NPM version 3 with shrink wrap. It needs a little bit more memory than NPM version 2. Your DigitalOcean box with 512 meg probably needs to have a little bit more memory. But NPM version 3 creates really beautiful like dependency trees. They're top level by default, but if you need multiple versions of the same thing installed simultaneously, it will handle that and deeply nest them only where necessary. I've been really liking NPM version 3. It's a more beautiful tree. It's got a performance overhead, but it's good. It's nice. It does dedupe stuff by default. When you're moving from NPM version 2 to NPM version 3, I actually clear out all the third-party code from your Node modules, and then just do an NPM install with NPM version 3. It seems to produce a nicer tree. So what do we get out of this? With 3 minutes and 42 seconds left, I'm so proud. So we get access to 230,000 JavaScript modules. Not just DOM manipulation stuff, but actual general like algorithms and JSON data sets, other things that are hugely useful in our front end. We're not copying and pasting stuff from Stack Overflow anymore. We can find things. The JavaScript, HTML, and Sass for all of our front end is located in a Node module which contains all those things. We can reuse anything without any extra work or even having to think about it up ahead. There's no premature optimization. We just make components inside NPM. And when we want to reuse them, it's just a simple require. This is what we use in production at CertSimple. This is what pays for my food and my house and other things. So we found it reliable, and yeah, it's been really useful to us. I'm going to tweet storm links to all the technology I've mentioned now. The scripts to generate Sublime project files, Sass NPM, Discify, all the bits and pieces I've mentioned. So follow me, I'm Mike MacCana. Also, if you're about to launch anything on the web, there is 50 quid off, or $50 off CertSimple. I'm from the UK. In the corner of the room, you'll also find really pretty Penny the Greyhound stickers. We like greyhounds because they're like fast and friendly and all that kind of stuff. Thank you. And also, if you have questions, let's go for it. You. We're currently using like a private registry. It's kind of bit, if something's not particularly related to our core business, we actually just throw them on the public registry and open source them. We're actually going to change to using like a private modules like set up from NPM pretty soon. So, yeah, exactly. It's no, yeah, yeah. We've got a slightly custom setup there. It's not ideal. I'd rather have someone else take care of it for us, which makes a whole bunch of sense.
What's your development workflow where all your components are developing those in isolation?
When you say in isolation, like in isolation from, sorry.
Right, I mean, so you might have the source for that component checked out.
Yep.
In one place, but it's being used, as a node module somewhere else.
Yep.
Where do you work on it?
Oh, that's an excellent point. Yeah. To be honest, I like to actually edit it inside the project file, and then when I go and actually update the module, I'll just copy it and then go npm publish from that directory. Yeah, it works fine. It's not something I've ever really thought about that much, but just to be able to just the convenience of having it in Sublime and have it be there is really it. And also, we tend to work on things. We tend to kind of, I guess, finish them, for want of a better term, and then they kind of become dormant for a while. Our SSE works. The last time we worked on it, we fixed an issue with SSE and gzip, like chunks versus SSE messaging. We haven't touched that in about 6 months. So we tend to have focused bursts of work on a particular area, and then once they're done, we go off and actually publish it as a private module.
Do you have any recommendations on materials or articles for convincing front-end legends who don't want to publish common
If only someone would write an awesome guest blog post with like a fully amazing detailed version of all this and publish it on the NPM blog. Hey, Ashley. I actually have a super long markdown version of this with all the things you need to put in your package.json, all the kind of relevant tech. It's a pretty simple setup. I find a lot of the Browserify docs are like, hey, use Browserify so you can use require. And people don't use Browserify because they want to use require. They use Browserify because they want access to all the packages. So that's probably like, as a user of Browserify and NPM in the browser, that's probably my biggest point of feedback. But yeah, like I totally feel that pain, and I'm personally hoping to fix it. So, yes. When you can't put something on NPM, like
A third-party module, like the select as guy, will put it on NPM.
it's interesting. I think people are actually really willing to fork the project in the case of the selectize guy. So it actually got pretty intense for a while. Yeah, I think to illustrate to front-end people that they care about are publishing, like, the kind of the Leave Roos and Paul Irishes of the world, like putting things like that is where front-end is happening now is a huge thing. Bower had a great case in terms of it handled Sass and CSS and all that kind of stuff. Now that you have options for handling Sass in NPM, and so the Bower was totally understandable in terms of, the NPM doesn't do this, and now NPM does do that. It's a really easy thing. So yeah, that's all I can say. It's like basically people like, that's where things are moving to.
So you haven't run into anybody that won't put it on NPM?
Like selectize was that, and then it was just people willing to say, I'm going to fork selectize and like publish it, and also, that has happened. Yeah, basically people started publishing unofficial versions of the packages, and then eventually the author says, I'm cool, I'm going to maintain it. Enough people are installing it. I mean, that happened with jQuery for a long time as well. jQuery on NPM was not from the jQuery Foundation. It was just someone who kept uploading jQuery. And then that just changed over time. And I think that pattern's going to repeat itself. Yep.
You found that the build phase and the deploy phase using NPM install is slower?
Yes. It's actually not so much NPM. Do you mean on NPM version 3 or using Browserify, or which part?
Yeah, just with the number of components that you're installing, packages that you're installing, where it checks all the metadata on the install phase.
Yeah, it's not the slowest part of our install is actually Browserify. I feel like Browserify should be a lot faster than it is. Because of that, I haven't thought so much about the NPM side of things. Browserify I do actually really like. It's just mainly the documentation and the speed isn't ideal. But I think that will probably change over time. It's getting very, very popular.
Do you guys have any peer dependencies in your module tree?
No, and I actually should know more about peer dependencies than I do. Yep.
So how well does this work if you are heavily bought into already the required JS workflows? Fetch, ship, and bail and start over?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I used require for everything for a couple of years. I used to use require.js on Node because I preferred it. And then I guess kind of things changed. Much in the same way I used to use like less for everything, but then Sass won. So let's just use yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard. If you've got an existing code base, moving it is, yeah, like annoying. I've never had to do that. I was lucky enough to have started this from scratch, so I don't have any like real experience in taking an existing project and moving it from require to Browserify and NPM. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yep. It's again, I think it's like it's all. I think the future of CSS is, to be honest, is like not CSS. There's this awesome post from a guy on the CSS committee, and he just doesn't care. He's like, all the variables are making CSS bad, and they've totally like 70% of all web developers are using Sass at this point, according to like Smashing and yeah, so it's kind of, I actually kind of hope that Sass will just be standardized. Right now, it's pretty much a de facto standard. I'm absolutely sure, like Webpack, for example, can produce smaller modules than Browserify. There's another thing called, Rollup, named after the Wiz Khalifa song. which does tree shaking. So if you go from fruit salad import pineapple, it will actually shake everything, all the other fruits away, and you'll actually end up with a bundle that only contains pineapple. It needs ES6 modules, so it's not huge. There are a lot of things that are actually better than Browserify, and there are a lot of things that are actually better than Sass. But there's like my general thing, especially running I have 1 hour of free time a day. The rest of the time I'm just working on a startup. It's pretty crazy. I pick things which have those network effects, because being able to go to the rest of the world and say, yeah, I'm using Browserify, I'm having this issue, it's hugely valuable. Technically, I am absolutely sure that there are things that are better than Sass, and yeah. Yes?
We've been using NPM in our frontend project with Webpack, and I think we have really good luck. And we haven't hit any of the packages where they're not in NPM, but we have hit a few packages where, as we pull them in via Webpack from NPM, they're much bigger than they need to be.
Yeah.
For example, an animation library that has a version that includes what works with jQuery and a version that just has a tiny jQuery shim.
Yep.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people publishing things on NPM that don't have a lot of idea about modularity. There's also some people who have the old browser-style namespaces. So pki.js, inside it, it's pki.js.org.pki.js. It's written like a script tag and then just published on NPM. The way I deal with that is by sending pull requests. To be honest, it's a matter of education. And yeah, there's a lot of, one thing actually we pretty much always do is we do window $ equals jQuery, because there's things like Stripe payment, for example. The jQuery world expects window $ to exist. It's no point fighting it. It's a waste of your time. In other cases, you want to send a pull request or maybe break something out into smaller modules. Yeah, there's a lot of education around modularity in the front end space. No. I kind of avoided Bower because the idea of installing a package manager, a JavaScript package manager using a JavaScript package manager just didn't appeal to me. So no, I have no experience in that, I'm sorry.
Just to clarify, so when you edit your, so you got all your node modules.
Yep.
You edit your node modules, once you're happy with it, then you copy it over and then publish it?
Yeah. It's basically at a point where something is done, we go and publish it. And that's, yeah. I think that's it. So thank you very much. I hope that was useful. I'm around. Grab some stickers and some coupons. They're rad. Thank you very much.